The views expressed on this special broadcast of the Take 12 radio show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT is not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
A very scary experience.
You know, God is a solution. God, the 12 step.
I like where he's going here.
Helps the community grow, helps us grow. Monty has done a phenomenal job. Lack of open-mindedness. And you're talking about taking people through a spiritual process and getting them into recovery.
Thanks, Monty, and thanks for all your support.
We need spirituality to make this thing work long term.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
And now, broadcasting on location somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific Northwest, it's the over-opinionated 12-stepologist, the Monty Man.
That's right, one and all. Welcome to another fine episode of the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show. If you're watching on YouTube, across from me right there is CADC Level 2, Mr. Dave Fleming.
Good morning.
Good morning, Dave. How do you like the patriotic theme in the studio today? Look at that.
I love it.
Look at that. Yeah.
You must be inspired.
I am inspired.
I got inspired yesterday.
Yeah, well, we're not going to talk about that on the show.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
But I know exactly what you're talking about, and my son told me, and I was like, what? I missed that? I was infuriated with myself.
Yeah, we parked out in front of the church.
Yeah, did you? Yeah. So welcome to the show, everyone. Welcome to the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show. A very special broadcast. We have on the show this week author, counselor, teacher, Suzanne Laura Thistle, and we're going to be talking about her book, CHEM-FREE Sobriety. 101 Trailblazers share wisdom and insight about their natural recovery from substance use disorder. And let me tell you a little bit about Suzanne, a native of New England. Suzanne Thistle began her non-chemical journey in sobriety in 1987. Which then led her to become a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. Her professional addiction experience spans over 20 years, and she currently teaches about drug use and misuse at a local university. Her roles have included executive and clinical director of 2 agencies, manager as well as therapist. While serving in these positions, she received the Legislative Advocacy Award for Addiction Professionals and the Treatment Agency Provider of the Year Award, both from her peers. During time off, Suzanne enjoys being with family, traveling, bike riding, hiking, relaxing at Newfound Lake. Welcome, Suzanne, to the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. One of the things that impresses me, Dave, about books when I get them in the mail is the way they feel in your hand.
Oh, I just love books.
Don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, and we're such a bookless society anymore, you know. And some books just feel like books, but this thing is just awesome. I mean,
there's something that happens when you actually have a book in your hand.
There is
flipping the pages, and you get to do little things like I get you can do some of that stuff digitally now, but
right.
It's just not the same. I would rather order a book and have it sent to my house than read it online.
Yeah. And this book, CHEM-FREE Sobriety, is filled with stories, real-life stories of people that have experienced substance use disorder. They've experienced dysfunction. There's differencing of opinions in here about MAT, medically assisted treatment. There's interviews. I mean, this, when you look at the title, CHEM-Free Sobriety, you might think that everybody in here is like anti-medication. That's actually not the case. But there are some strong views, and we're going to be talking about that. Suzanne, what in the world made you decide to write a book I mean, this is an amazing book.
Thank you so much. It's funny you said it feels good in my hand. That's not the first time I've heard that. There's something about just having that matte. I think that
the cover, the
surface,
that surface, yeah.
For the book,
it's silky. It feels silky.
Right.
I like it. Yeah.
So, when I was really, really young, I was writing poetry and have had a poem published probably 20 years ago. I've had I wrote a biography over 20 years ago, and so it's been in my blood for a long, long time. But what just really pushed me over the edge to write this particular book and publish it on my own, which, first of all, it's the first book I've ever written, and then to publish it on my own was like, oh my God, I have no idea how to do this, but this information has to get out there now because most publishers take a year, and I'm like, we can't wait. People are dying. This needs to happen now.
Right.
And my biggest issue is when the pharmaceutical companies put together a bill, the CARES Act, which some folks in the profession will know about. The pharmaceutical companies are the ones that put that out there, and they got a legislator to help it push through and get enacted. And so we saw millions and millions of dollars come into our state, as well as other places, to help with this opiate epidemic, supposedly. But it was just all medication, and we're all sitting there going, what the heck? Why is this just medication? Why aren't we just helping people who have an addiction? And I started to see people get over-medicated, or people get prescribed and be told they're going to be on this for life who are 19 years old and maybe have been abusing substances for a few years.
Sure.
Or just, anybody with an opiate use disorder has to be medicated. And I just was like, what is happening? What's going on here? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And it just, I had just left a job, and I started, I was seeing people starting to come in there saying, my drug of choice is Suboxone. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is crazy.
Well, they actually said that. My drug of choice is Suboxone.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Exactly, because we would say, what is your drug of choice?
Sure, you bet.
And in our intake process. And so it just got to the point where I was just infuriated.
Suzanne, let me ask you this. So were these people that were saying this, for the most part, were they people that had been using Suboxone because they were buying it on the street, or were these people that were using Suboxone because it was presented to them as a part of treatment in the past? No,
this was, I'll take whatever I can get.
Okay.
People were shooting it up. I mean, I'm sure they still are.
Yeah.
And that kind of blew my mind, like, you're shooting this up? Like,
of course.
I think any addict, and I say addict because that's what they call themselves. I've called myself that. I don't distinguish, for me, I don't distinguish the difference except for a different drug. It's, alcohol, whether it's Suboxone. I mean, there's different treatments for them for sure, but we're just chasing something to make us feel better.
Yeah.
We're filling that hole.
Yeah.
And, but what happened with the opiates was just, it was out of control, and I think it still is. I think that there's still too many people, as soon as they hear you have a substance use disorder, an opiate use disorder, you're in for medication. And not to say that I'm against MAT, whether it be Vivitrol or Suboxone or Methadone. I have a hard time with now they're using, like Vivitrol, where you get shot up for a month, although Vivitrol isn't an addictive medication. So I have a little bit more tolerance for that, but now they're using buprenorphine in a shot.
So I want to make a statement. I want to make a statement about Vivitrol. So Dr. Finkelstein, who is he is, I don't know if he still is, but I know he was one of Gorski's right hand guys. Invited me to a dinner at the I think it was the Cape Cod Symposium on Addictive Disorders, and we sat down. I think there was about 12 of us, including Dave, Dr. Alan Berger, author of 12 Stupid Things That Mess Up Recovery. And we also, and I met him also at the Evolution of Addiction Treatment Conference in LA. And he talked about Vivitrol. It was kind of a new deal at the time. And his statement I found very, very interesting. He said, so when you inject Vivitrol into the hip and the person uses opiates, nothing happens. They don't get high. And so how long do you think a person's going to continue to use a drug when there's no payoff? And my remark, because I get myself into trouble all the time, was I said, if you're an addict like me, I'll continue to use it until, well, I'll just keep going. It's just like the guy that's pulling the one-armed bandit, that's the gambling addict. He's not getting a payoff, but he keeps putting money in that thing. Right? So just because you're not getting high doesn't mean that you're going to stop trying to.
It's like the old days when they used
to something else. Yeah, I mean, you know as well as I do that the drug is not the medication.
Exactly.
Answer.
Dave, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say when I don't know, this is before I got serious about recovery.
Yeah.
I remember a doctor telling me, because, I heard about antabuse, and I'm like, yeah, give it to me. And he's like, I'm not going to give it to you. You're just going to drink anyway. And that's the thing is, I thought about later on. It's like, if you're going to drink or you're going to use, you're going to do it regardless.
Yeah. So that's really, now in your book you say, and I think this is very important that people know this is in the introduction. This is right off the bat. You say, people who suffer from alcohol or other drug addiction attest to the fact that once they take a sip of alcohol or use an addictive drug, all bets are off. So my statement to that is the brain doesn't know the difference between street heroin and Suboxone. Right?
Exactly.
You put it in the body, all bets are off.
Right. And that's why I see a difference between Vivitrol and Suboxone or methadone. Suboxone and methadone both have the chemical in them that increases dopamine in your brain versus Vivitrol that doesn't.
That's true.
So they're not getting an addictive medication. And some folks have done well with all of these drugs, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
But my concern is, or mine and the 101 folks in this book talk about, we know a way that works, and you don't need medication. Now, is it necessary to have a bridge? For some, it may be.
Sure.
It may be necessary to have a bridge. You've been doing it for 30, 40 years. You've been shooting up every day, that sort of stuff, maybe. Or you've been drinking. Well, and we know and have known, I hate saying this because this stuff is, addiction has been around forever.
No, say it.
We're using other things.
we are not ashamed of any of our statements that we make here at Take 12 Recovery Radio, are we, Dave?
Not at all.
So go ahead, say it, Suzanne.
Equal opportunity offender.
Trust me, I have thick skin. I have no problem saying what's on my mind most of the time.
Good.
Also, sometimes, I'm like, somebody asked me a question on another show, and I said, well, how many places is this being broadcast? She goes, 70 countries. I'm like, okay, well, here you go.
Well, yeah, because we now broadcast. We broadcast worldwide now because it's internet radio. So there you go.
Yeah.
So what were you going to say that you hate to say?
So anyways, I think that for some folks who have been using consistently over and over again, alcohol, we've always sent people who may have severe withdrawals to the hospital, even though you're not supposed to really send them there because they don't do detox, right? And
right.
I'm being sarcastic there. But send them to detox or the hospital, wherever we could get them in. They may need a benzo to get them off the alcohol, but a short taper, let's get them in, get them out, and let's move them into recovery, or start them on recovery immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So these medications, most of them have been around for a long, long time, right? And
yeah.
We're still in the predicament now where we're still dealing with 80,000 people dying a day in America. I mean, a year in America.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with 70-something people overdosing on opiates a year. So we have to get to the root cause. We have to get to the underlying stuff. And, knowing that you're 12-step oriented radio, I think it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
This book is so perfect. CHEM-FREE Sobriety is an excellent book for anybody who wants to know a little bit more about this 12 steps, who wants to understand how people, got into addiction, found recovery, and are living their lives now, but also what are their thoughts about medication. Now, I didn't say, look, if you have bad thoughts about medication, I don't want to talk to you. I let people say what was on their mind.
Yeah. In fact,
and then in the back of the book, I don't know if you saw the back of the book, which people forget. There's information from them of what they think we need in our society today. It's information for society, for lawmakers and decision makers, doctors, anybody who has anything to do with addiction, whether it be alcohol or any other drug. That back part of the book is really important for them. But it's also important for people struggling with addiction who have found recovery to advocate for other people in recovery. We can keep silent as long as we want, but until we start, and that's why I love that you have this radio show, if we start standing up for ourselves, because nobody's going to do it for us. Look it. We're in the same predicament. It's just a different drug at a different time. Methamphetamines and marijuana are coming up next. I've started to see that methamphetamines are on the rise now. Well, because people are overdosing on opiates, we've got to switch over, right?
Right.
And pot's not harmless, right?
Yeah.
So I had this fight online that, pot's not addictive. Yeah, it is. It is.
Plus, it's been genetically modified, and
you betcha. And now we have this big push towards psilocybin, all in the name of cancer treatment.
Right. Yeah, we're voting on it.
That's right.
Anyway,
that's right.
It's the whole. Doctors and pharmaceuticals have their place, but I think the problem is it isn't about correcting the problem, finding a cure. It's about let's come up with the next drug to treat the symptoms.
That's exactly what they do.
Right?
That's exactly what they do.
I remember, we've talked about this before. I think it was 2013. I was working at a treatment center in Minnesota, and we had speakers come in, and we had this rep come in talking about Suboxone. Nobody really knew about it.
Right.
It's like, and he's giving this presentation, and like 3/4 through the presentation, he makes a comment. It's like, our job as practitioners is to create lifelong customers. And you about heard the air suck right out of the room.
Yeah.
And we're like, does this guy know where he's at? And that was like hugely eye-opening, because he forgot for a second where he was at. And that just tells me, everything I needed to know about the drug. And like you said,
or did he say it so that you would now have it in your head and start to believe?
There you go. Right. There you go.
The pharmaceutical companies and the doctors, the crooked doctors. Now, all doctors are not bad. There are some good ones there, but they want you to be on this for life, so you continue to keep coming.
So this is a great segue into this sound clip I want to play, and I want to get your opinion on it. This is about the topic this doctor is talking about is not even related to what we're talking about here, but it is just so right on. And in fact, Dave sent me this video today that has nothing to do with the topic we're talking about, But this piece, I was like, man, I've got to edit this in today before the show because it is so relevant. This is Dr. Larry Pileski. He's a world-renowned pediatrician. Listen to what he says here in this sound clip, and then I'll get your take on it, Suzanne. Here's Dr. Pileski.
In my understanding of knowledge, there are 3 ways of knowing things. 1 is intuition. 2 is through what people tell you is true. And 3, by you discovering the truth and knowledge on your own, through your own research and through your own experience. We are losing 1 and 3. We are losing our ability to use our intuition, and we are losing our ability to critically think, to discover answers, and to do our own research and have our own experiences. And we are watching a society and a world where the only thing that we know to be true is what our authorities tell us to be true. And so we are externalizing our authority, we are externalizing our power, and we're giving it up to false gods and false prophets who we are trusting to guide us and take care of us properly.
Wow.
Wow, that's good.
Wow. I am exactly, and I
get chills.
I know, I get chills too. I see pharmaceutical companies. I see mandates. I see people telling us to fall in line, and we just do it. And all the time, we know better. We know better. I mean, I got to point this out. So I'm in a restaurant that have fans in the ceiling. And everybody's wearing masks, and there's plexiglass in between the booths, and the fans are going, and everybody knows this isn't working. They all know it. Mm-hmm. And we're falling in line like little robots. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And we're doing it. Do you think this is happening in the field of recovery?
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that. I'm so glad you played that because he's absolutely right. We have to remember, and that's why I wrote the book. I'm like, this is not right. I know it's not right. They shouldn't be giving all these meds to people that don't need them, and nobody's saying anything. And I'm saying stuff, and I'm getting shame-based because I'm speaking up. I'm saying, I know. And that's why I went all over the state. I knew if I just, I could have 100 people right here in my area. But I said, you know what? If I do that, they're going to say, oh, that's just your area. So I went throughout the whole state, and I picked, I picked a few people, and then it was word of mouth. And then I had to, up in the northern part of New Hampshire, I had to, call the churches, do you have anybody in recovery up there? But, and the other thing is that people in recovery, 12-step recovery, please, for the love of all that is right for people struggling with addiction, speak up. Look in the back of the book of CHEM-FREE Sobriety. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of information you can use to help support people in recovery, because if we don't do it, we the tribe, we the people in recovery, if we don't do it, it won't get done.
That's right.
Right now, most of the money is going to doctors and upper management who have no clue what recovery is. Some are learning through trial and error. But majority don't know. They weren't in this profession. They weren't working on the streets with people,
Right.
And so we need to open our mouths. I know there's, one of the traditions in the 12-step world is, don't publicize. Well, Bill W. went to Washington.
Well, yeah, see, that whole thing, that's totally been twisted. It's our public relations policy that's based on attraction rather than promotion, not our personal stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to start, and a lot of times what I'm hearing out there, people telling their stories so that they'll help other people, or people brand new in sobriety. Well, that's fine, but you need some people, and that's why I wanted to make sure I had some folks, a lot of folks with long-term sobriety in that book. So most of them in CHEM-Free Sobriety have over 10 years of sobriety. We've got 7 in there that have over 40 years. Those are amazing people who have incredible sobriety. They're just the best people on the planet. Not to say, I talk about the girl who has only a year of sobriety. She's the least of sobriety in there, and she's been through a lot. She's died I don't know how many times, 4 or 5 times. But she's still kicking and she's doing really well. She's an amazing woman, Mona. But we need to use our voices, especially right now. We need to remember that what we know is true, that intuition, we know it's to be true, but we're starting to second guess it. Some people are starting to second guess, oh, maybe they are right, that people should be on medication for life,
Yeah.
But one of the things you find in that book is that most people don't say that. Most people do not say you should be on this. I don't think anybody in there says you should be on it.
No. Yeah.
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't. And any residential treatment program that's worth its weight that is using, for instance, Suboxone, is going to wean their people off of it before they dismiss them from that center. They're not going to teach them how to manage it for the rest of their lives. They're going to wean them off. And I've known a couple centers that were very successful in doing that, and they lost their funding. Imagine that.
Right, I'm not seeing that. Most people are getting on it, and they're staying on it.
They're staying on it, yeah. So the few places that are worth their weight that are doing that seem to be losing their funding. So we're going to take a break, and then I have a question for you from your book. And then later on in the show, we're going to actually read Zach's story. All right, more with the author of CHEM-Free Sobriety, Suzanne Thistle. 101 Trailblazers share wisdom and insight about their natural recovery from substance use disorder when we come back. Don't go away, my friends. Much more.
Hey, it's the Monty Man here, and I'd like to introduce you to what I truly believe is the gold standard in sober living. Absolute Ministries. Absolute Ministries was founded to provide faith-based positive housing to men and women that have completed a drug or alcohol inpatient rehab program and want to live for Jesus Christ. While at Absolute, you will make a commitment to lead a substance-free life in an atmosphere that focuses on accountability, integrity, character, transparency, and responsibility. What can you expect from Absolute? Personalized curriculum to address specific individual areas of emotional and spiritual growth. Family atmosphere to foster many lasting friendships in Christ. Accountability through the genuine support of others who can relate, encourage, and challenge you. Life skills training. Positive group activities and outings. And connecting with a local church. We encourage men and women to find their niche, their passion, by getting involved and volunteering locally. For more information about the sober living of Absolute Ministries, visit absoluteministries.org, the gold standard in transitional housing and mentoring.
Hey, check it out. You can now access all of our shows from a variety of podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Podomatic, and Player FM. Simply search for Take 12 Recovery Radio, and you'll be tuned into the best in recovery broadcast journalism. Also available at take12radio.com.
Hey there, this is Pastor Sean Silveri from the Oregon Ministry Network of the Assemblies of God, and you are listening to the recovery talk and positive music of Take 12 Recovery Radio.
All right, welcome back to the show. You've tuned into the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show, the world's original and oldest recovery talk and positive music radio station, broadcasting to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the studios of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting on the outskirts of beautiful downtown Albany, Oregon. Our guest on this show is Suzanne Laura Thistle. She's a counselor. She's a teacher, an educator. She is the author of CHEM-FREE Sobriety. 101 Trailblazers share wisdom and insight about their natural recovery from substance use disorder. Before I ask you this question, Suzanne, how can folks get your book?
It's on Amazon, and you can get it at Barnes & Noble. There's Gibson in New Hampshire as well, in Concord. In
okay.
Hampshire. I haven't pushed too far on that because it's just me,
Sure.
Working.
Sure.
So.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
but Amazon.
Yeah, pull it up on Amazon, folks. Chem-Free Sobriety. CHEM-Free Sobriety. All right. You say, quote, in today's world, recovery does not mean the same thing as it did before we had an addiction crisis, end quote. What do you mean by that?
Well, I was brought up in the recovery world where you were in recovery if you were abstaining from alcohol and other addictive medications or drugs. And now that's not the case, which is fine if that's what the world has turned to. Now, if you stopped heroin and you're using marijuana, that's okay, and you're called in recovery. So it's a lot different than what it used to be. And there's not a lot of motivation to be abstinent because, there's a lot of harm reduction out there, a lot of people who fight against abstinence, but I worry that we're on the wrong track here, that those things popped up. Harm reduction's been around forever, too.
Sure.
Addiction's been around forever. Medication's been around forever. But all of a sudden, they're taking first place. And recovery, working on yourself, and being free of things that cloud your mind and make you not feel. Now, those are things we want to do. We want to feel the feelings. We want to work through them. We want to have a clear mind and a healthy lifestyle. So what we do know is that most professionals who've been in this profession for a while know that there's cross-dependence and cross-tolerance. If I pick up another drug, that the chances of me becoming addicted to that drug too are pretty high, or it won't be enough and it'll bring me back to my drug of choice. So just staying clear of addictive drugs or medication is helpful. And you absolutely can be chemical free.
What I've found is that there, like you say, people want to recover. They want to feel better. They want to do something different. What I've found, I just celebrated 16 years recovered, that people just don't know how to do it. And there's a lot of people that are actually, that have some, quote unquote recovery time, which, like you say, some are still smoking pot and say they're in recovery, which I don't agree with, but people need examples. And so, I haven't had a chance to read your book, but it sounds awesome, and I can't wait to do it. It's, my story is, I did a chemical free, but my thing is I had to figure it out as I went. When I went to treatment, they're like, when you okay, your aftercare plan is like this, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to go to sober living, and I'm going to do all this, and I'm going to have a cushion, and they said, nope, you're going home. You know what to do? Go do it. And I had to go do it. And my thing is I had to go. I ended up going to meetings every day for almost 2 years and getting involved doing service work and not isolating, because that was my problem. I could isolate. I'm fine with being by myself, or I can get a self-help book and figure it out on my own. Well, that's not always the case. And I had a great counselor that told me when I went to treatment and I brought all those books with me, she's like, don't you dare open one of those books. So in being working in the field, I've found that people just don't know what to do, and they're getting the wrong information, from TV or from movies or from even their doctor that's giving them bad information. We need more mentors in recovery that are teaching the solution.
And that's the problem. That's the big deal,
Right.
Dave, right? People aren't, we know that over 80% of people that attend 12-step support meetings do not have sponsors, don't utilize sponsors, aren't working the steps, right? The ones that do are successful. But we've got so many people.
They don't need to now, because it's a different kind of recovery.
Because it's a different kind of recovery. Now, I'm good friends with Ken Seeley. He is the founder of A&E's Intervention. He's a good friend of mine. He's been on my board. But he'll be the first one to tell you, you don't recover by sitting at home watching Intervention.
Osmosis.
But some people...
and this is a good lead into my next book, which will be coming out hopefully soon if I can ever get it done. But it is a step-by-step, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, in whole health way. My undergrad is health education, so it's a combination of sobriety and health,
Yeah.
a whole health approach,
Yeah.
not just physical, mental, spiritual, but other aspects as well. So that'll be coming out soon. I neglect. I don't want to say what the title is yet because I'm not solid on it.
I understand. So I'm going to take a few minutes here, and I'm going to read a Zachary story, and just so that the listeners kind of get an idea of how this book's laid out. So this is Zachary B. And each story starts out with the date of the interview, the sobriety date of the one being interviewed. In this case, his sobriety date was 6/30/13. The hometown, Hooksett, and then a question. And there's a couple of questions. And the first one is, when did you start drinking or using drugs, and how did it progress? And Zachary said, I was 8 years old and living in Maine. I was getting into mischief and had a lot of room to roam around because we lived on a large farm. Then we moved to Rochester, New Hampshire. And the first time I got drunk was a year later at a wedding. I was drinking other people's drinks on the table when they weren't looking. Sound familiar, Dave? I didn't get caught, so there were no repercussions. I didn't get sick or black out. I've always been short and would get picked on for it in 6th and 7th grade. I remember always wanting to fit in. I started skateboarding at the public library with a group of older kids and got validation from them because I was a good skateboarder. One day, I was in a treehouse and a friend pulled out some weed and we smoked it. I ran through the woods laughing and had a good time. Everything changed when I went to high school and had a lot of friends. I went to a private high school and played sports, hockey and football. Life was good. I was the only one in my freshman class who used drugs. Interesting that he says that. Life was good. But he was medicating this whole time, But
in his world, life was good.
Yeah, in his world, life was good. I was considered the bad boy. In my sophomore year, everyone was doing it. My drug use wasn't affecting anything yet. I love that. Yet. When I was 15, my friend whose father had terminal cancer stole some of my father's OxyContin and asked if I wanted some. Yes, please. Right? He sold it to me for $15, and I did it that night. I got super sick because I did almost all of it. Isn't that just like an addict?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm not taking one of
Give me
these.
more.
One of the most dangerous things you can put on the outside of a prescription bottle is take as needed. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of like a serving size, right?
Right, a serving size. He said, I thought opiates were not for me. However, it opened the door for me to try other drugs. I was doing Percocets and random pills during school. I smoked weed every day and drank on the weekends. In my junior year, I got in trouble at school for being high at a school dance and got suspended. Oh, see, now the consequences are starting up for this guy. My parents had me talk to a psychiatrist who thought I might have ADD or ADHD. Well, of course they did. And prescribed Adderall. Okay. My life drastically improved on Adderall for a short time. I was a straight A student on Adderall with minimum effort. However, I abused Adderall very quickly. I started sniffing it and told my doctor it was wearing off in the middle of the day. Within 3 months, I was taking 90 milligrams a day. I barely ate and wouldn't sleep. My friends and I would sniff it on the weekends, stay up, smoke weed, and drive around.
After graduating from high school, I went to Plymouth State University with my best friend. I made it for 3 semesters, got put on academic probation, and gave up. Friends at Plymouth introduced me to cocaine and ecstasy. The big thing for me was cocaine and alcohol. People around me could do it, turn it off, go to school, and get their stuff done. I could not. When I came home, I was a mess. I told my parents I had been doing cocaine for the first 3 semesters. They put me in substance abuse counseling and tried to push residential treatment on me, which I was very good at avoiding. At 20 years old, I enrolled in the University of New Hampshire. You see a pattern here? The guy is very functional. He gets a good education. He's a hard worker. He's a good guy.
Good starter.
Yeah, good starter. I had a steady job and was still drinking. I ran into a friend, and we decided to get some cocaine. We went to buy it off my friend's uncle, and he cooked it up with some crack. I took my first hit and thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever done. I smoked crack every day after that. I stopped showing up to work, and within a month, I started shooting it. Within a month, I was shooting cocaine and heroin. I stopped going to UNH and was a full-blown heroin addict. I was one of those users who didn't sleep. I was using 7 grams of crack a day, shooting up 4 to 5 times a day. It was a 24/7 cycle. I stayed up for 22 days one time. You need a lot of drugs to do that. I was hallucinating all the time. When I was 22, my dad picked me up after I hadn't been talking to him for a long time. I hadn't showered in days, was on the run, and had been arrested for my first narcotics possession. He picked me up and brought me to treatment. It was a 30-day program on Cape Cod. I walked out after 3 days and was shooting cocaine again. My buddy took me under his wing and taught me the ins and outs of being a junkie. At age 23, I overdosed. I remember being in the back of an ambulance and gasping for air. They brought me to the same hospital where my dad and mother worked. When they brought me in, I had aspirated so much of my fluid that I had aspiration pneumonia. Oh, my gosh. I was hooked up to a ventilator for 3 days and was in the intensive care unit for another 7 days. I remember physicians and counselors coming by to talk to me about treatment, and I told them, I'm okay. I walked out of the hospital, shot dope for 3 days, and disappeared again. I had another warrant out for my arrest and decided to go to a methadone clinic. I got a methadone and showed up at court. I started working a regular job and saving a significant amount of money. I was shooting a ton of cocaine while I was on methadone. When my friend's probation officer came over one afternoon, we had needles all over the place. We both got picked up that day, and I ended up going to jail for 6 months on a probation violation. I was only on 70 milligrams of methadone at the time, and it took 33 days to detox. I didn't sleep, and I would sweat through 2 sets of clothes a day. I would never have gotten off methadone had I not gone to jail. I am grateful for this. In minimum security, I was eligible for work release. I would work until 4 and then get dope. I was bringing dope into the jail and left the jail with a significant dope habit. One night in 2011, I decided I couldn't do it anymore. I showed up at my parents' house, went down into the basement with a gallon of whiskey, and drank myself stupid for 2 weeks to detox. After that, I started going to the Suboxone clinic and didn't use other drugs for 11 months. I never went and got psychological help. The underlying issues were causing me to use, but the Suboxone took care of my cravings for other opiates. I started working, paying bills, and having relationships with my family. It was an enjoyable year. Then I got bored. I started doing crack again, shooting dope, and selling my Suboxone. My parents began to notice a change. I was arrested in Lawrence on my birthday, on my way to pick up drugs. I didn't show up to court and went on another year-long tear. I got heavy into bath salts and shooting them up. My brother-in-law knew I had a warrant out for my arrest and said he would drive me to turn myself in. He drove me there at 2 a.m., and I did turn myself in. I was smoking spice and doing other drugs while I was in jail. However, I did start to pray and convinced my parents to bail me out. They allowed me to stay in the basement of their new house as long as I got into a program, so I did. In August 2012, I was walking home from a new job, saw some guys looking into cars to break in, and said to them, "Hey, let's go get some drugs." And then he goes on to explain he didn't even know these guys. He just walks up to these strangers and says this. And at Christmas Eve dinner, I nodded off into my soup bowl. In March, I experienced the worst detox ever. My parents tried to get me into treatment, but they finally kicked me out and put me up in a lodge in Manchester where people went to get high. I went on an absolute bender. In the third week of June 2013, I was in the hotel, looked around at the people, the situation I had put myself in, and something came over me. I was now the guy who was showing the younger kids how to shoot up. I realized I'd had enough. I grabbed this kid's cell phone, called my mom, and told her I would go to whatever treatment she wanted me to. I just wanted help. She said, "I'll pick you up right now." I had to have one last score, so I had her pick me up the next morning after I shot my last bag. My mother made me call Teen Challenge. She and my father and I needed to be in Teen Challenge within a week. They gave me a week to get my physical and TB test in order, and I was supposed to detox that week. But I left every day and got high. I went into Teen Challenge the following Monday and stayed for 15 months. I did 11 months after that as an intern, and then they offered me a full-time job. I have been here for 6 years and manage academic life. I finished college on May 16th of this year. I'm taking MCATs and planning to go to medical school. I've always wanted to help people and generally think I am meant to do this. Drug use is not an option for me today. And then here's the next question. Looking back, when do you think it was mostly out of control? And he answers, the worst of it was from when I was 19 years old until I was 27. How are you able to not drink or use daily is the next question. And this is what he says. He says, I have support from God first. I read the Bible every day, pray, have people in my life who are counselors. I have an incredible support network that ministers and mentors me. The other aspect of it is service. My job here provides an excellent platform for me to serve all the time with people who are walking the same path that I have. We serve the homeless and try to figure out diverse ways to help people. I exercise, run, and lift weights. I read self-help books and literature to help me become a better person. Dale Carnegie's Dysfunctions of a Team and Life Applicable Skills. I meditate as well. What is your thought about medicated-assisted treatment? Well, medication has its place in treatment. I believe there are a lot of great doctors who want to help people. Is there anything you want those struggling with addiction to know? And then he states, it's never over. You can always get clean. I've seen the worst of the worst, and their lives change through recovery. It's still possible. That's Zachary's story. Interesting. There is definitely a pattern, right? He's a smart guy. He goes to college. He uses, he gets sober. He uses, he gets sober. But it isn't until he plugs into the spiritual aspect of his program,
right,
that he stays sober.
Right, and the other part of that is he's mentored, he's got support, he's doing service work.
Yeah.
You know, he's doing all this
doing
stuff.
the deal.
Right.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah. Well, he's now in medical school. He's a DO. He's working on his DO. So
wow.
He's really an incredible success. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. He's doing very, very well. Yeah. So people can and do make it and you know, don't need medication to live a healthy, normal life, you know.
And you got to give yourself enough time. You know, the human body is an amazing machine that will, you know, it'll create new cells and neural pathways and all these things if you give yourself enough time to do it.
Yeah.
And put the right stuff into it.
Right. Right.
Yep.
So one of the comments in the book, and this was, I believe his name is Ryan. the question is asked in his story, what is your thought about medication-assisted treatment, MAT? And he says, if someone doesn't want to be abstinent, but they also want to do fentanyl, an MAT program may be suitable. That is sad, but often true. He says, if you don't treat the underlying condition, they're going to continue to behave the way addicts do. The right abstinence provider is equally appropriate. Prescribing things to people in a blanket manner is crazy. If somebody says MAT is all they're willing to do, that's all they're willing to do. That's better than somebody being dead. He says telling somebody you're going to be on medicated assisted treatment for the rest of your life, or this is as good as it gets, isn't true. The whole limbic system is never able to heal or respond appropriately while being dosed daily with Suboxone. The actual healing process, just from a physical standpoint, doesn't take place until you remove the outside substances from the brain. True, Dave?
Boom.
Yeah. Pow. Right?
That's right.
I mean...
People need to feel the pain, because you're going to have to detox off Suboxone or methadone anyways, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Eventually, you're going to have to feel. And, the theory is that if you're on Suboxone for a little while, you can get to the place where you can talk about this, maybe medicated, that you're able to talk about some of those underlying issues without feeling that extreme pain. But then there are others who are I'm so grateful for the pain I went through, because had I not gone through that pain, I would have nothing to look back at and say, I don't want to feel that way again,
Right. That's why I look at it. It's like if I hadn't gone through everything that I've gone through, I wouldn't be the person that I am today to be able to help others.
And that's why in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about we do not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Right?
Right.
Because if we do, then we're not going to be helpful to the next guy. And we are a world that loves to run from the uncomfortable. We love to run from the pain, and it is part of our survival to experience the pain. Wouldn't you agree, Suzanne?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And people are afraid to feel that. You don't have to now because there's a pill for everything, so you don't have to feel. If you're uncomfortable, you can take a pill. If you're feeling anxious, take a pill. If you feel, there's so many people that are addicted to benzos. They finally decided, and I think it was just this year, to put a label on benzodiazepines that says even taking it as prescribed can cause addiction. I don't know if exactly those wording, that's what they're getting to, right?
Yeah.
So we can take a pill for anything, but until we just work on it with a sober mind, how do we work through it?
Well, and
I'm curious, Monty. Why did you choose Zachary?
Well, the Teen Challenge story is part of it, but that really isn't the main part, because Dave and I both work for Adult and Teen Challenge. But the main part, the biggest reason is because of the way first of all, it's obvious he's an intelligent kid. So yes. a lot of people say, because I there was a guy posted on my YouTube version of a show we did back in 2014 called "So You Hate Alcoholics Anonymous." I reposted it yesterday because this gentleman responded by basically saying people in 12-step programs, they're low lifes, they're losers, they're not very smart. They just don't have any willpower or blah 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 blah. And unfortunately, that is the viewpoint of many people about people that are living with substance use disorder.
Well, because of the lack of experience.
From lack of experience, and they don't know what they're talking about. And so so I wanted to show Zachary because this guy is obviously a great guy. You remove the substances.
There's an ER doc in there too. He's anonymous too. He's in there as well, and he's doing really well too. And he only had a year or two of sobriety, maybe 2 years when I interviewed him. And his story is an interesting story when it comes to Suboxone, because he was just taking everything. And, you know, the thing with Suboxone, too, is you can still abuse other drugs while you're on it. I hope that doesn't feed into anybody.
Right. Well, and the thing about Zachary that
these guys were.
The thing about Zachary that impressed me, his story, is it was much like mine, because I had said I will never use intravenously, and then I found myself doing that. And Zachary was the same guy. I mean, he started.
You'd never know it. If you look at him, you'd never believe it. He's just a wonderful, handsome young man. You know.
Yeah.
So I think he's in his 30s.
Right.
And he's just great. He's just a great guy. I wonder if he's listening, because he is on my Facebook page. I noticed that you know, I posted this on. I think you might have too. So I'm hoping he's listening, and if not, I think I'll send him a copy of this once it's done, because everyone in that book, the reason why they did the interview with me of it is because they knew 5% of all net sales will go to people with substance use disorders, but also they knew it would help people. And I don't know if we said this on here yet, but this book, when it came out on Amazon, the new release, it was a #1 bestseller, both in 2 different categories. It was a #1 bestseller.
Wow.
Kind of blew my mind.
Wow.
Both in alcoholism and drug addiction. Again, you know, it doesn't really matter what you're using to escape. This book can help you. It's just such a great book with so many great stories. There's people who abused opiates, people who abused stimulants, people who abused alcohol. But they all came to the same place, and most, not all, asked God for help. Some of them used other paths, and that's fine. You know, that was their path. But all live in, you know, without any medication, addictive medication. So.
Well, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming on our show and sharing your experience, strength, and hope as far as what you've done with your life since the trauma that you've experienced, and now helping others through this very powerful book. CHEM-FREE Sobriety.
It's on audio, too, just so people know. It is coming out on audio pretty soon. It's already under review. So, you know, if people can't read very well or just don't have time, I know there's a lot of doctors, MDs buying this book now, and so, you know, don't have a lot of time, so audio is a good thing for them. It is an ebook, too.
Nice. Very, very good. Any closing thoughts, Suzanne?
I just, you know, our main reason for putting all this together, me and the 101 other folks, we all just want people to know that they're not alone, that they can get help, and this book is a way to at least start the process. Pick it up. It's at Amazon, CHEM-FREE Sobriety at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Gibson in New Hampshire. It's a way to... And someone just told me the other day that she's the director of some prevention programming, and she's using it, she's promoting it as a prevention tool for teenagers. So that's a good idea. I just did it with my class. I read a few of the stories like you did today and asked them to answer questions about prevention. So it definitely can be used for a prevention tool. And don't forget, if you're a representative out there, if you're whether you're Democrat or Republican, this is something you should read if you're you know, interested in helping people with addiction.
Yeah, you bet. Addiction, substance use disorder, all this stuff, trauma, everything. It's no respect or appeal. It doesn't care what side of the fence you're voting on. You know, addiction is the #1 health crisis in our world today, and yet recovery from it gets the least amount of attention due to stigma. So, you know, this book helps break that stigma. I so appreciate it so very much. Suzanne, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So I kind of mentioned about this guy that posted this real negative thing about addicts and alcoholics, and, you know, they're not like regular people, they're losers and all that kind of stuff. So this closing song kind of speaks to that, and then it has a little bit of a surprise on who he's talking about. You'll probably be able to figure it out. It's by recovery recording artist Mr. Jeff Bates.
And we're going to close out this show with this song. It's entitled, He Wasn't Like Us. Here's Jeff Bates.
We didn't know for sure, but everybody said that old boy ain't right in the head, he's a little slow. We'd hide in the bushes not making a sound. When he'd walk by, we'd push him down on that dirt road. I was just as guilty as my friends. We had a lot of laughs at his expense. He wasn't like us, he wasn't cool. He'd just smile even while we were being cruel. He stood out, he didn't fit in, but we kept throwing the stones. No, we didn't let up on him. He never said a mean word, no, he never even made a fuss. He wasn't like us. Later on he made a name in our town for hanging out and running around with the rough crowd. They were boozers and losers and low-class broads, but he saw good in them nobody else saw when he brought it out. Then the rumors started flying that he was some kind of holy man. But we set him straight and told him to his face he was a crazy man. He wasn't like us, he wasn't cool. He'd just smile even while we were being cruel. He stood out, he didn't fit in, but we kept throwing the stones. No, we didn't let up on him. He never said a mean word, no, he never even made a fuss. He wasn't like us. Well, I remember the day he got in trouble with the law. They cussed him and kicked him and mocked him and whipped him. Then they nailed him to the cross. He wasn't like us, he didn't fit in. And I fell down on my knees and wept for him. He never said a mean word, no, he never even made a fuss. He never did nothing wrong, all he ever did was love. He wasn't like us, he wasn't like us.
The Southern Country Recovery Sounds of Mr. Jeff Bates. For more of his music and to visit his website, visit jeffbates.net. A special thank you to my incredible guest this week, author of CHEM-FREE Sobriety, Suzanne Laura Thistle. Until next time, this is the Monty Man along with the Take 12 Recovery Radio family, and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.